All right, here we are on Shed Talk. This next gentleman, I'm going to tell you, has face cancer. He's had over 30 reconstructive surgeries. And you know what? He came out stronger than ever. His story is about courage, resilience. And you know what? It's finding the purpose and getting through the pain. This guy is absolutely amazing. You're going to enjoy him on this show. You know what? Terry Healey, you know what? Welcome to Shed Talk.
Creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk.
How's it going?
Hey, great. Thanks, Kevin, for having me. I appreciate it.
You know what?
I conversation.
I had to really work on the actual intro because when I looked you up and I'm going, a guy that actually had reconstructive surgery 30 times on your face.
Yeah.
You got to tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, I mean, I could have kept going, right, Kevin? And that's really, I think, the power of the story. So should I give you kind of the backstory?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so when I was 21, I was a senior, I was actually a junior at UC Berkeley, and I was living life on Easy Street. All was great. Life was just easy, right? And then this bump formed behind my right nostril. Long story short is that there was a tumor that was pushing against the right side of my nose. Fortunately, I could feel it because if it was growing the other way, I wouldn't have been able to. So we got the diagnosis, rare form of cancer, fibrosarcoma, very, very rare. Usually doesn't happen in the head and neck. So they take care of it. They do surgery. They say, we caught this in the early stages. We think you're good to go, and we're not going to need chemo or radiation. This typically would metastasize to the lungs. In your case, we're looking good. But so I went back to normal life, and I was invincible, right? I was only 21. And then 6 months later is when, bam, itching started, kind of this weird sensation. Tumor came back, ended up having a major procedure at that point that resulted in the removal of half my nose, the shelf of my right eye, the muscle and the bone from my right cheek, part of my upper lip, part of my hard palate, 6 of my teeth, and woke up attached to my chest because they had transplanted a full thickness skin graft from my chest to fill in this cavity that had been created on my face. And so at that point, it was like, whoa, suddenly I'm facing not only a life-threatening cancer, but I'm also dealing with disfigurement. I look like the Elephant Man, Kevin. And that's how I came out of that procedure. And then the journey really began from there.
So you've got your face attached to your shoulder, right?
Yeah.
And the mind, like and we listen to listeners and they're going to talk about them people, all of a sudden you're disfigured. Now, how important that is. And then, like you said, now the journey begins. When did you realize it was going to be an uphill battle, or how did you feel at that moment of that change? Like, here it is. Oh my God, my life's over. Should I commit suicide right now? Like, what were you going through at that particular time to start? Because a lot of people, when you talk to them, there's that moment of, oh no, I can't go on. What was it for you?
Good question, because that was a really critical point, right? You're really vulnerable. Well, my doctor, who, by the way, 40 years later, I'm still friends with, greatest guy in the world, came in immediately knowing that I was going to be freaked out when I came to, right? And they put me in my room, and he came in and he said, hey, Terry, I'm going to make you streetable before you leave the hospital. We're going to get this thing. He was this incredibly confident guy, right? And his confidence, his spirit, his charisma, all that stuff rubbed off. I was like, whoa, this guy's great. He could sell me anything, right? And I believed in what he told me. And so it was that critical moment when he said, you know what? We're going to take care of this cancer. We're going to cure you of it. We're going to get you reconstructed back to the old Terry. What I always say, Kevin, is regardless of whatever the final outcome was, in my case, the fact that he told me those words right off the bat really gave me hope. And that's what I needed more than anything. And so to me, it's okay that I believed in that. And maybe it wasn't, going to be the greatest outcome, but I believed in that, and it kept me going right at that point when I needed it.
So when you're at that point and you're listening to him tell you this, you must have self doubt about yourself at that point. How did you get to that next level? Because I want to dig a little deeper in this, and I appreciate. Here's what the word said, but when we dig down deeper in who we are as a human, going, oh my God, okay, he's made me feel comfortable, but here's the reality how I really feel.
Yeah. Great drill down. So I think I was somewhat ignorant of thinking beyond uh, kind of what was going to happen because I sort of believed what he said. And where it really hit me, I think, Kevin, where the pain started for me and the difficulty started was when I left the hospital 3 weeks later. And that's when, you end up in the waiting room, right? I'm waiting for my parents to pick me up curbside. Suddenly, I'm in a different environment. You're very protected and insulated in your hospital bed. They've seen everything. They treat you like a king. But you go down to the waiting area, and suddenly it was like people staring at me. I remember seeing curious kids kind of with their parents, and you kind of see the kid being embarrassed, and he'd kind of point at me, He was obviously asking his parents questions like, what happened to him? And then I'll never forget, kind of off in the distance, at a safe distance, I'll say, I see this group of young boys and girls giggling at me. They were kind of pointing and giggling at me. That was brutal, right? And so suddenly I'm like, whoa, this is bad. Like, this is really bad. And I will say that from there forward, it became much more difficult because it took time to go from the first procedure to the next. And suddenly I began to realize this is not going to be fixed quickly. This is going to be a long, long journey. And during that journey is when my self-esteem and confidence just started deteriorating right in front of me. So yeah, it became don't get me wrong, man. I bounced back, but it was 5 or 6 years where I didn't know where I was going to land.
And it's interesting because you're 20 something, 21, correct?
Yeah,
And did you have a girlfriend at the time?
I did.
And
I did.
so we look at young men all of a sudden, and women are a little bit different, meaning because looks were important to them, I'm assuming, because social media where we are today versus back then. But here you are, 21 years old. Did the girlfriend stay with you?
Nope.
Okay. Now she doesn't stay with you because of let's dive into that.
Yeah. Well, I just remember actually she sort of left before that major procedure because I'll never forget we were at a party and we're having a beer and we're chatting and she said, "Well, how did that biopsy go? That was that first procedure." And I said, "Well, actually, it's malignant." And she just kind of looked at me like, "Whoa," like no response, right? And like we didn't talk about it. And then she basically disappeared. She became unavailable. She was gone. So that was pretty rough. And there were other people, right? Very close friends, um, girlfriends, girls that I hung out with that disappeared. And so it's interesting. It was boys and girls both. Some of them just couldn't take it, didn't know how to deal with it. I don't know what was going on in their heads, but it certainly didn't help my psyche, that's for sure.
And so there are your friends, and I'm talking about young boys. Now, all of a sudden, here you are, your life just totally changed, trying to find a new set of friends. Now, it's like, or were you in university at the time as well?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then trying to get your schooling done and seeing this, and then all of a sudden you're isolated. It's kind of like when that movie came out, The Elephant Man.
Yeah.
Remember that movie? Because that would have been about the
Yeah.
same
Of course.
time. Was that
Of
about the same
course.
time that came out?
It probably was. I definitely was watching.
Yeah. And when we watched that, and that's with I think it was Barbara Streisand, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when we're going through that, and the mental anxiety and the mindset that you had to have there, because you're as a young man, they're getting beat up, and there's no getting through it. Not trying to get a girlfriend. Like, how did you get through? I'd love to have a girlfriend. I'd love to have that. How did you get through
Yeah.
those moments?
Yeah. So I will say that I did have a core group of friends, right? And I had a support system that were incredibly supportive. They were caring, they were nurturing, they were committed to me, and they were full of positive energy. So I did have a big team of people around me that stuck with me. When I say these people disappeared, like the girlfriend and a
Right.
few other friends, there were a handful of them, but the core stuck with me. So that always helped. But I'll say, they tried their best to keep me integrated into the scene and inviting me to parties. And
Right.
I just sort of started retreating because it just wasn't fun to walk into a bar anymore. And I'll be honest, in the old days, I was like a homecoming prince, right? In high school. So I could walk into a bar and it was much easier to engage with females. Now suddenly, like I'd walk into that bar and those girls are like turning the other direction. Like, look at this guy. At least that, and Kevin, this is really important for people to understand. At least that's what I felt. Now, whether they were even looking at me is a whole nother question, right? I think when you look different, suddenly you think everybody's staring at me. Probably the reality is very different. People just aren't noticing you. But you take everything much more literally when somebody turns. It's like I'm paying attention to everybody now. So yeah, that was really hard. And it was just like, man, I want a girlfriend, but that's not going to happen. I just sort of just retreated more and more. And luckily, there were girls that came around that would ask me out. And so I was always intrigued by them because they were obviously very mature. They were deeper. There was something about them that enabled them to somehow see through it, right? So um, yeah, mysteriously they did come around, but I was so insecure, Kevin, and my insecurity was growing so fast that they all turned away from me eventually, right? Because like who wants to hang out with some guy that is just insecure and doesn't feel good about himself? That became my issue.
So now the insecurity. Now I'm going to go back and even go further here because I want to ask another question because as young guys, again, I keep going into this.
Yeah.
You're insecure, okay, and you're feeling the insecurity. What did you find was your greatest superpower during that time? Because it's not the
Yeah.
suicide. I'm not going to commit suicide. My mental health is whatever that's going to be. Yes, I'm insecure. But what's that superpower inside that you had there that really sparked you to keep going? Yeah, you're insecure, but what was that one power that you had?
I write and talk a lot about my survival kit, which consists of 7 things. But to your question, I'm gonna jump straight into really my focus, my mindset, my goal setting. I was fortunately blessed that I was somebody that could get super focused on things. And so I learned that, hey, I'm going to start, and you'll relate to this, Kevin, for sure. One of the things I did was I started to set personal and professional goals, but I set singular goals, right? So I didn't want to cloud myself or get overwhelmed. It's like, okay, I've got major issue here, insecurity. How do I deal with this? Well, one, I'm going to start working out every single day and I'm going to feel better about my body. That's going to put me in a better mood for the day. It's going to help me build my confidence because I started to, I was lifting and I was doing cardio, but I was in the best shape of my life after this thing happened. I just started working out like a fiend. And as when your body starts to look better, you feel better about yourself. So I couldn't control my face, unfortunately, but I could feel better about my body. And so that was one thing I focused on. That helped a little bit. And then the other side was the professional side was, okay, I'm insecure. How do I address this? And getting that first real job was significant. And learning that I had to address the biggest issue which was I didn't feel good in front of people, right? So how do I overcome that? And one of the things I learned to do was push myself to over prepare for every meeting, prepare for every presentation to the point where most people wouldn't, so that I could handle any objection that came my way. And that when I walked in the room, I knew my content. I could communicate it and I could feel good that I had a brain. Maybe I don't look so good, but so those little things, I think, you start to feel better about yourself when you have a positive mindset, when you walk into a room and feel like I'm prepared. I'm not going to get sidebarred by anything. I know what I'm talking about, and that really helped. So those were two big things: focus and goals.
So you started talking about the preparation, okay? That when you went into a meeting, you prepped. What does that mean to prep? Because we say we prep, but what does it truly mean? Like you're going into an interview, you know your stuff, you're the smartest guy in the room, okay, because you prepared. How did you start that initial prep to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I would anticipate, I would make sure I understood the agenda clearly. And I always hated it when people called meetings and there's no agenda, which by the way is kind of a waste of time for everybody
Yeah.
anyway, because you should be able to come prepared, right? So I'd inquire, what's this about? What are we trying to accomplish? What's our goal for the meeting? But I would just literally, if I had to do a presentation, I would put my slides together and I would really think through each slide. What are my bullet points? What are my talking points? How do I make sure that I don't forget something in that presentation? How do I make sure that I engage the audience? How do I bring in some anecdotes, some things that are going to get people to focus and not fall asleep? And so it was about doing the extra work, the extra research to support my proposal, for example, the extra data set that maybe somebody else wouldn't bring to the table and they would wait for somebody to ask for it and then go back and get it. No, I wanted to bring it all to, and practicing, it sounds kind of weird, but I would practice my presentations out loud every day. If I had a week's notice on something, I'd practice it every day. And doing it out loud really helped me to not just sort of know the material, but come up with new ideas along the way. Because as you're talking, sometimes you probably know this, when you're talking, sometimes it's like, wow, I just got another idea. And you throw it in and it just adds fuel to whatever your message or your position is on the topic. So that's kind of how I did it.
Hey, take a minute and smash that subscribe button, and let's get back to the episode.
And it's interesting because when you talk about that, it's kind of like doing a shotgun approach where you're going to put it all out there, but then all of a sudden you become the sniper. That all of a sudden, let's redefine that and create curiosity and ask better questions for yourself, not anyone else, but opening that Pandora box to say, okay, what's a better question that I'm going to ask that they're going to ask me to make sure that I'm on top of them because they're not as well prepared as what you are. Now,
Right.
I'm going to go back into it again and say, after what you just said on the first two, what's your superpower?
What's my superpower beyond that?
Yeah,
Well, I would say it's having a positive mindset.
the
It's
positive mindset.
well, we choose positive, right? We choose our attitude every day. You can have a negative attitude, you can have negative self-talk. People do it every day, but there's always alternatives, right? It's like I'm not smart enough. Well, yeah, I can learn. I mean, there's always some other way to look at things. So a positive mindset for me, Kevin, begins with gratitude. So how I arrive at a positive mindset, which kept me thinking positive about the future, was I would start with every day and every night, I would start with gratitude, think about all the things I am grateful for. They were going to remove my eye. They saved my eye. Despite whatever happened to my face, there was always something to be grateful for, right? I had half my nose. Maybe they can fix the other half. Um, Whatever, but it was also just all the things I was blessed with, right? That I had support. I had a great family. I had people around me that were going to bat for me anytime I needed them to. So I tried to keep that positive mindset, and that I think combined with my religious faith gave me that hope and strength to keep looking forward and believe that and visualize that I was going to be in a better place in 2 years and 3 years. And so I spent a lot of time in visualization, which is part of it too. Um,
On your
that's what I
visual
would say.
on your visualization, what was the key point in your visualization? Was there a certain time of day? Was it in the morning? Was it night? Where was the one part of visualization that became internal for you?
Yeah, well, I just it's like building muscle, right? You just have to practice. and you get better at it. But I would practice it typically every day during my ordeal. I still use visualization, positive energy every day, but I'd use it in two ways. One is visualizing where I'm going to be in 2 or 3 years, which is in a better place, or, for now, I'm happy with where I am, but in a happy place. So how do I visualize that? What does that look like? And I would use different things, different visualizations. But the other way I use it, and used it a lot then, was whenever I was concerned or anxious, had anxiety about a procedure, was anxious about a recurrence, which I was always anxious about a recurrence, right? Is I would step back and I would just lie down. So if I went to a doctor's appointment and I came home from that, I wouldn't jump right back on the computer. I'd lie down and I'd say, I'm going to visualize. I got to do it right now. And it would only take 5-10 minutes. And I'd visualize. I'd put myself, I could describe the scenes that I would concoct in my head, but they always calm me, soothe me, put me at ease. And that's why I still use it to this day. So it helps, I think, you build confidence because you start to believe in stuff that you're dreaming about and that you're believing in and that you're seeing. I think it's really powerful. I talk a ton about it in my book. So it's a
So,
very powerful exercise.
so that 5 minutes, when you come in, you're going to lay down on the bed, just take a 5 minute break, 10 minute break, and then you do your visualization, correct?
Yes.
Because that's so important. A lot of people don't realize when you're the anxiety, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on it, is that
Yeah.
you're in anxiety. I'm not feeling well. I'm just uncomfortable. I'm just going to lay down and visualize the greatness that I possibly can be, or the situation that I'm in, and visualizing it in a positive manner, correct? Okay, I just want to make sure. Now,
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
I could give you an example of what I
yes,
do.
please,
Okay.
yeah,
If
yeah.
you have a minute or two,
Oh, well, you bet.
I'll try to condense the story. But for me, what always worked was, for visualization with me, it was always like imagining myself being somewhere else, taking myself out of today where I am lying on my bed. I'm not there. I'm actually putting myself somewhere else. And so at that time, I used to backpack a lot. So I'd imagine myself backpacking up in the Trinity Alps, let's say up in Northern California. And I just imagine myself hiking along a trail. I would imagine the aspen trees fluttering in the wind. I'd create this scene in my head, which I loved, right? It's like the most serene, quiet, great place to
I'm
be.
I'm working with you on this at the same time. So if
Okay.
I'm sitting here and I'm visualizing what you're going through, because how many
Okay.
people don't realize how important this is, just to be in the moment. So
Yeah,
please,
so
yeah.
so I'm hiking along. I'm going through that aspen grove, and the trail turns to the left. And I don't know what's ahead of me. I turn on that path, and up ahead of me, I see this great big waterfall. So I just imagine myself continuing my hike straight toward that waterfall. And then I would just imagine myself literally walking to the waterfall, underneath the waterfall, and then just standing there and imagining this cold, clean, refreshing mountain water just careening over my head and flushing any negativity, any malignancy, any of my worries, just flushing all this down through my body, down through my toes, down the stream beyond. It was kind of this cleansing process that I would go through in this beautiful environment that I always loved being in. And I thought, hey, that's all it takes. And now I feel 10 times better. And that thing, whatever's there or what might be there, is gone. It just got washed right through me. It's gone. I've just been cleansed. So that's like an abbreviated example, but it's something that I would do.
And it's interesting. That is so powerful, because I'm sitting here and I'm visualizing that, and I'm walking with you through this and saying, okay, here's the anxiety, and I'm walking through you, and I can feel like going in and then hitting underneath the waterfall, then having it come off. And how many people are listening to this and say, try this. You don't have to be in the situation, but try the environment that you want to put yourself into to do the cleansing. And then all of a sudden that sudden release of that aha moment. And you can
Exactly.
actually feel that. And now that was pretty powerful when you look at that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, people talking about taking a deep breath, stepping back, whatever. I think that the little things, I just read books about it because I was intrigued by visualization. I started reading books, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I could do this. I can personalize this to myself. I don't have to do what they're doing. I get the concept, and let's see if it works. And there's a ton of very famous people that have achieved greatness that use it all the time, right? I mean, visualization is very powerful. It can be used in so many ways. And going back to what we started with, Kevin, on this conversation is like, that really started to build my confidence too, because it was like, I'm going to be in a better place. I don't necessarily know what it's going to look like in 2 or 3 years, but I'm going to be happy in this place. And I see myself in a happy place. So
Like,
little things, one little steps, right?
it's interesting. I can totally visualize that and see it. All right, now I'm going to jump ahead now. Okay. Now we've got, here you are, you're visualizing, and all of a sudden, when does it come the key point in your life? It's time to write a book. What was that one defining moment to say, all right, here's my book, The Resilience Mindset. Did I say it right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And when and why and how at that particular moment? Why did you do it?
Great question. So I had written, excuse me, I had written a memoir back in 2001, and then it got republished by another publisher in 2006. That memoir was called, or is called, At Face Value. That story kind of opened me up to opportunities to speak and present in front of bigger and bigger groups, right? That goes back to the preparation thing that I was practicing before all that. That really helped me gain confidence because I figured, well, I can prepare and I can get on the road and do this and I can feel confident. So what happened, Kevin, is as I went to these presentations over time, my toolkit was growing, right? So I had this survival kit on that I talked about and that I wrote about that I helped me get through. But people would come up to me after these talks and they'd say, I actually read your book before the talk. And you talk about your story a little bit, but I've read about your story. So I know your story, but in the talks, you share all these other methods, this methodology to help others deal with adversity. And you packaged it up in this prescriptive way. You need to write another book. And I kept hearing that, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah, when I find time to do it. And I was working full time, in high tech. So finding that time was difficult. I finally, after hearing it so many times from my audience, said, I have to do this. This is important because that's really what my purpose is, right? I'm trying to help other people deal with adversity. So I left my job in high tech, told my wife I was going to retire. And that lasted a couple months. We played some golf and had some travel. And then I came back and I said, I have to write this book. So I wrote the book. And that was really easy because I was delivering on something that I sort of knew I had to do. I just needed to articulate it in a way that, would make sense for people in written form instead of just as I talk about it. So that's how it all came together.
And what are you most proud about your book?
I'm proud of the fact that I have now kind of, as I said, packaged something up that I think helps others understand the 4 phases of my resilience framework and utilize the questions that I pose throughout to personalize it to themselves in their own journeys so that they can take away something actionable for themselves. It doesn't matter what your adversity is, right? You're going to find tools that you can pluck out of this and try. One size doesn't fit all. That's the whole point, right? But there is a framework that you can follow. And I think it just helps people kind of go through these 4 steps. And so I'm really proud of that right now because I think that getting feedback from readers that it's resonating and that's ultimately my purpose, right? That's what I want to do. It's not about the money. It's about helping people. So that's how I can give back.
Yeah. So when you take your book, you take everything that you have and everything's great and it's very successful. And here we are right now, we're at zero. Like today we start from nothing, we move ourselves forward. What is the one question that you would give to your readers, give to your audience, give to everybody that you know, one question that you want them to ask you?
I want them to ask me. I think to put things into, to give the reader more clarity, I would probably say I would say to ask me what was my most pressing challenge. Because, and bear with me for a second, because one of the things that I talk about and write about is that I think people have so many priorities. They have so many goals, they have so many challenges, and they get overwhelmed, and therefore they can't make progress. They can't move forward. And so it's about this exercise of how do you figure out what your most pressing challenge is? Well, it's not that hard. You basically have to sit down, take time by yourself, write down all your fears, all your challenges, changes that you're uncomfortable with. Write that list. Then look at it and try to figure out what's the most pressing. And here's the thing. Once you have it all on paper, it's pretty easy to figure out what the most pressing challenge is. The liberating part is throwing everything else away and saying, okay, I've got my one thing. A lot of times it's going to encompass other things that are on your list anyway. But that's how I started to make progress. And it goes back to focus and goal setting. And I think that's where I started to make huge progress on regaining my self-esteem and my confidence, because I could achieve that goal. It wasn't so overwhelming because it's all I was focused on. I didn't have, Kevin, I don't know if you ever worked for big companies, but a lot of times at the end of the year, they'll say, all right, it's time for New Year's resolutions. It's like, and I just sit there and go, really? Like, how many do we got to come up with? And it's like 5 or 10. And it's like, nobody's going to achieve them all. They're just going to get clouded. And so discard that approach and just try to, so I would ask them to describe, how I arrived at my most pressing challenge and how that helped me grow. And maybe they can learn from that and do the same.
That's pretty powerful stuff. So the next thing I'm going to do, how do they find your book?
So it's on Amazon, The Resilience Mindset. It's my website, terryhealey.com. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. So yeah.
And they want to book you as a speaker. How do they do that?
They can email me. The information's on my site. It's terry@terryhealey.com.
You know what? This has been absolutely amazing. I got one more question. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that we should ask you?
Well, like what's my motto, maybe?
Done. What's your motto?
Okay.
It's one of those things we always forget. What's that one question you want to be asked, but you weren't asked? Let's ask it.
Yeah, I would just say that I would ask people to think about this. So be aware, be alert, be attentive, be open to what's happening around you, because you can and you will be impacted by conversations you have, by people you meet, by events that happen. And so take the time every day to reflect and think about what you might have learned today, what conversations you had. Maybe they were difficult conversations, but that's where I got my greatest inspirations, was just listening and being open to people that I think in the past I probably wouldn't have been open-minded to. Instead, I was just like all ears, like, hey, I want to open myself up to people and find out what they're all about. And when you do that and you share vulnerabilities, I think people become, you learn so much about other people and maybe their struggles and ways that their methods can help you. Little tidbits, little nuggets.
That's amazing. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so. I want to hear about, sometime I want to hear about your workout routines today, and see how I can keep in the same
Focus and
method you're in. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Well, you know what? Like, share, pound that button that says subscribe. Thank you very much for being, Terry, for being on Shed Talk. This was awesome. And you know what? Guys, get the book. You'll see way more stuff. And you know what? Mindsets, it's all up here. Thanks, Terry, for joining us on Shed Talk.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you.
Now you know. Shed Talk